My mom smiled while telling my fiancé I had breakdowns and made up stories to scare him off a week before our wedding. So I got married anyway and mailed her invite back with a brutal note she'll regret reading forever. I never thought a smile could feel like a knife. But the one my mom gave my fiancé that day, it wasn't love or warmth. It was surgical, precise. I walked into my parents' living room with a bottle of wine, ready for a casual lunch with my mom, dad, and Jake, my fiancé. We were a week away from our wedding, and things were finally feeling calm. The chaos of planning was behind us. Dresses fitted, venue paid, family RSVPs done. Mom was already talking when I walked in. Her voice was low, sweet, like she was confiding in Jake. He looked uncomfortable, his shoulders stiff, his hand gripping the glass of water. She didn't even notice me at first. Or maybe she did. Maybe she wanted me to hear. Sometimes she exaggerates things when she's upset, she was saying, with that fake sympathetic smile she used when she was gossiping about people she hated. She's had breakdowns before. She'll tell stories that aren't completely true. My stomach dropped. What the hell are you talking about? I snapped. Mom turned to me like nothing was wrong. Sweetheart, relax. I'm just making sure Jake understands you've been through a lot. It's important for him to know what he's signing up for. Jake stood up immediately, face pale. I need some air, he mumbled, brushing past me. That was the moment I knew she'd done it on purpose. There was no misunderstanding, no concern. My mom had been planting seeds of doubt for months, little comments here and there about me being emotional, dramatic, or unstable. But this was nuclear. A week before my wedding, she looked my future husband in the eye and tried to poison him against me. I didn't chase Jake. I didn't even cry. I just stared at her, trying to understand what kind of person does that to their own child. And she smiled again. "You'll thank me someday," she said. That was the last time I saw her before the wedding. What she didn't know, what she never saw coming, was that her little performance that day changed everything. Because I didn't cancel the wedding. I went through with it. And a week later, after the ceremony, when I mailed her the envelope she thought was an apology, she opened something else entirely. A note that ended her ability to hurt me again. And the message inside. It made her call me in tears, something she hadn't done in years. But I didn't pick up. Because by then, she finally understood what I'd taken from her. And I made damn sure she'd never forget it. Growing up, my mom was the kind of woman people called charming. She could walk into a room and make everyone laugh, make everyone like her. She was magnetic until you really knew her. Then you saw the switch flip. Behind closed doors, she was cold, calculated. I learned early that her approval wasn't about love, it was about control. If I did what she wanted, she'd smile. If I didn't, she'd cut me down until I did. It wasn't obvious at first. She didn't scream or hit. Her weapon was words. Little things like, "You're so sensitive," or "I don't think that friend really likes you," or "You should lose a little weight before school pictures." Just enough to make me doubt myself. She kept me small. When I started dating in college, she got worse. Every guy I brought home, she found a flaw. "He's too ambitious for you," or "He seems fake." If I didn't listen, she'd act friendly to their faces and then tell me privately that they said something cruel behind my back. I believed her once. Ended a relationship that could have been something real. I only realized what she'd done years later when that guy, Sam, told me at a reunion that my mom had called him after we broke up. Told him I was mentally unstable. It still makes me sick thinking about it. But by the time I met Jake, I thought I'd learned how to handle her. I was in my 30s, living 2 states away, with a solid career and a therapist who helped me recognize manipulation. Jake met her only a handful of times, and I tried to keep it that way. Still, she always managed to get in his ear. The first red flag came early, at a family dinner. I went to the kitchen to grab dessert, and when I came back, Jake was sitting stiffly, his eyes darting between Mom and me. She looked innocent, sipping her wine, saying, "I'm just so glad she's finally stable now. You're so good for her." I laughed it off at the time. Jake didn't push it. But later, he told me she'd said I had bad episodes in college. I'd never had any kind of breakdown, just normal stress and anxiety like everyone else. I told him she exaggerates. He said he believed me, but I could tell it made him wonder. She'd done that all my life, taking tiny truths and twisting them until people doubted me. And I let it slide because she was my mom. When we got engaged, she acted thrilled. Called every day to help plan. Sent me links to venues, dress ideas, playlists. She made herself part of every decision. At first, it felt nice, like maybe she was trying to change. But soon, she started planting her poison again. Are you sure Jake's ready? He seems nervous. He didn't look at you the same when you talked about the honeymoon. Little drops of doubt, dripping into my head like acid. I told Jake I needed space from her a month before the wedding. He agreed, said she made him uncomfortable. We both decided to limit contact until after the ceremony, but she wasn't done. And the week before our wedding, when we stopped by to drop off her invitation, she saw her last chance to ruin everything. And she almost did, almost. Because what she didn't know was that I'd already started keeping records, texts, voicemails, emails, every manipulative word she'd ever said. And that proof was about to become her biggest regret. After that lunch, everything started unraveling fast. Jake didn't come back inside for a while. When he did, he was quiet, too quiet. On the drive home, he barely spoke, just stared out the window. I could feel him pulling away, like a door slowly closing between us. When we got back to our apartment, he finally said it. I need to think. Your mom said some things that really threw me off. My stomach dropped. You don't believe her, do you? He hesitated. That hesitation said everything. She said you lied about your dad's drinking, he said quietly. That it wasn't as bad as you made it sound, that you made him sound like an alcoholic when it was just stress. I felt my hands go cold. My dad was an alcoholic. I'd spent most of my teenage years cleaning up his messes while Mom pretended everything was fine. To hear her rewrite that, it felt like gaslighting on a new level. I told Jake the truth, every detail. The hidden bottles, the fights, the night she called the cops on him, and then lied to everyone saying it was a false alarm. He nodded slowly, but I could tell he was torn. My mom's poison worked because it sounded believable. She mixed lies with half-truths. Over the next few days, things got worse. My aunt called out of nowhere, saying Mom told her I was having cold feet. My cousin texted to ask if Jake was okay because someone said he'd been crying at work. It was all garbage, all traced back to her. She was turning the whole family against me, and she didn't stop there. 2 days before the wedding, Jake's mother, who barely knew mine, called me. Her voice was icy. Your mother reached out to me, she said. She said she's worried about Jake marrying into drama. That you've had mental health episodes. I could barely speak. I felt like the air was being sucked out of my chest. That's not true, I managed to say. She hesitated, then sighed. I told her it wasn't her place to say anything. But you should know she sent screenshots. Screenshots? I felt dizzy. Later that night, Jake showed me what she'd sent him too, screenshots of texts between me and my therapist about my anxiety. Messages I'd written in private moments. Except they weren't from my phone. They were fabricated, fake texts. She had literally made up messages that looked like I'd said things like, "Sometimes I tell stories that aren't real when I'm upset, and I worry Jake will find out the truth." It was all fabricated. I confronted her over the phone. She acted insulted. Why would I make something like that up? Maybe you're forgetting what you said. You've done that before. The gaslighting was so sharp I could barely think. I cried that night harder than I had in years. Jake held me, but I could feel the doubt in his arms, hesitant, unsure. I thought she'd finally destroyed us, but something inside me snapped. I realized that this was never about protecting me, or helping. This was about control, about keeping me under her thumb no matter how old I got. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to end her game entirely. And I already had the tools to do it, because she'd left a trail. A trail I was about to burn her with. The night before the wedding, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room scrolling through everything. Texts, screenshots, voicemails, anything that could explain how my mom got those fake messages. That's when I noticed something small. The messages she sent Jake had an old contact photo, one I hadn't used since I changed phones a year ago. That meant whoever made them had access to old data. My stomach sank. There was only one person who had my old phone before I traded it in. My cousin, Lily. She was my mom's favorite, her mini-me. I'd given her the phone last Christmas because hers had broken and she couldn't afford a new one. I'd factory reset it before handing it over, or at least I thought I had, so I called her. She answered with that shaky, guilty voice people get when they already know why you're calling. "Hey," she said. What's up?" I didn't even waste time. "You gave my mom access to my phone backup, didn't you?" Silence. Then she said it was for a surprise slideshow for the wedding. I didn't know she was going to. I laughed, sharp, bitter. "Don't lie, you sent her my texts, didn't you?" She broke. "She said she just wanted to show Jake how much you struggled before therapy, so he'd understand you better." I swear I didn't think she'd fake anything. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. The betrayal was double-edged. My mom had manipulated Lily into helping her spy on me, then weaponized that to fabricate a version of me that was unstable. I finally saw it clearly. My mom didn't want to stop my wedding. She wanted to rewrite who I was, to make me the daughter she could always control. When I told Jake everything, he looked wrecked. He believed me then, finally, completely. He said, "Your mom's sick, and I don't want her anywhere near us again." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of peace. The next morning, we stood in front of our friends and family, minus her, and got married. My aunt whispered that Mom had come down with the flu. I didn't correct her, let her have her story. But while everyone else danced and drank that night, I slipped away with my phone and laptop. Because I wasn't done. I'd collected everything. Her fake screenshots, her voicemails, the call with Lily, even old recordings of her twisting stories about me. I put it all together in a private folder titled The Real Story. And on the morning after our wedding, I mailed her the invitation she'd been begging for, but inside wasn't a ticket to reconciliation. It was a message that would gut her reputation to pieces, because I was done defending myself. Now, I was going to make sure everyone saw her for who she really was. After the wedding, when the hangover faded and the flowers were dead, the anger cleared into a plan. It wasn't chaotic or sexy, it was methodical. My whole life had been full of things she'd said that rewired the room the moment she walked in. If she wanted reputation and control, I would take those cleanly from her and return them with interest. First rule, never react emotionally in front of people who can be swayed. That meant no public meltdowns, no accusatory posts, and no dramatic confrontations where she could play victim. I had to be surgical, factual, organized, unassailable. If I wanted her version of me to die, I needed receipts that couldn't be gaslit away. I spent 2 mornings mapping everyone she'd lied to or might listen to. My aunt who gossip shared everything, my father's old drinking buddies who still took her side, the church group where she was active, the extended family on both sides, and the one mutual friend who idolized her. If I could show them the source material, the fake texts, Lily's confession, the voicemail where she coached people to repeat her lines, I could break the narrative she'd built with 1,000 tiny lies. I cataloged everything chronologically, with dates and short notes explaining context. Screenshots of the fabricated texts, side by side with my therapist's real messages, careful to redact anything private that wasn't relevant. The recording of Lily admitting she passed the old phone and how Mom asked her to find dirt. A transcript of the conversation where Mom told Jake she'd saved him from marrying into drama. I labeled every file plainly, like evidence for someone else to read without needing me there to explain it. Next, I wrote the note. I didn't want ransom letter venom. I wanted clarity and humiliation that felt public and permanent. Not a meltdown, a verdict. It had to be short enough to be read quickly and long enough to sting. I drafted it, rewrote it, then left it alone for a day and read it again with normal air in my lungs. It said, plainly, that she had lied, fabricated messages, and manipulated family members to sabotage my marriage. It listed a handful of irrefutable facts, and then told her the one thing she'd always done to control people: rewrite the past. I ended it with a line that would be hard for the family to ignore: that I had copies of everything and had already shared them with key people who deserved to know the truth. But I wanted to hit her where she lived, the family mailbox, and the neighbors who would be the next amplifiers. People in our town talked, she thrived on that. So I packaged the wedding invitation, the one she'd been begging for, with a printed packet, the note, a timeline, and copies of the most damning evidence. No threats, no theatrics. Just facts in black and white. Then I made copies. One packet for her, one for my aunt, one for the church secretary, one for my father, and a sealed copy I sent to a cousin who still admired her, but who I hoped would be shocked enough to stop the story from spreading. I also added a digital folder, password protected with everything else, and put the password on a physical card in the envelope so she couldn't claim it was a lie. I wanted the evidence to be portable and permanent, something that could be forwarded, printed, archived. The night before I mailed it, I almost folded. Part of me wanted to confront her in person, to watch the color leave her face. But that was drama, not consequence. The revenge I wanted wasn't immediate satisfaction. It was dismantling the infrastructure that let her rewrite me. I wanted people to look back and realize she had been the author of the rumors all along. I walked to the post office at dawn. The town was quiet, the air was cold. I slid the envelopes across the counter and left without watching them move down the conveyor. I thought of the smile she'd given Jake, the way she'd said, "You'll thank me someday." I thought of how small I'd been for so long. When I got home, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. The preview made my stomach drop. She opened it, she knows. And that's when something I never expected happened, something that would change the plan entirely. The text came from Lily. She'd promised not to get involved again, but now her name popped up on my screen and my pulse spiked. I opened it. She opened the letter, she's freaking out, but there's something you need to know before she calls you. I stared at it, uneasy. Then another message came through, longer this time. She said she didn't care about the wedding or Jake. It was never about that. She said she wanted to stop you before you ruined her. I think she meant something else, something bigger. I didn't understand at first. Ruined her how? I texted back. She said you were about to find out something about Dad that would destroy her reputation. That's why she started the lies. I froze. Because the week before the wedding, around the same time she started poisoning Jake, my dad had called me for the first time in years. He sounded sick, shaky. He asked if we could talk after the honeymoon, that he had something important to confess about how things really were when I was a kid. At the time, I thought he was talking about the drinking. But now, the pieces started connecting in ways I didn't want them to. I called him that night. He answered on the second ring, his voice raspy. "I figured you'd call," he said quietly. "She told you, didn't she?" My heart pounded. "Told me what?" There was a long pause. "That I'm not your biological father." The room tilted. I gripped the counter to stay upright. "What?" he sighed. "I found out years ago she cheated on me when you were about 6. I didn't say anything because I loved you. You're my daughter no matter what. But I think she knew I was going to tell you soon. She's terrified you'll find out who he is." I could barely breathe. Who? She said it was a man from her office back then, but I looked into it after I found the old letters. It wasn't a coworker. His voice cracked. It was her boss, your principal. It felt like the air had been punched out of me. I remembered him, Mr. Harris. A smiling, married man who'd always been a little too kind to me when I was a kid. Everything suddenly made horrible sense. The secrecy, her obsession with image, her constant control over me. She wasn't protecting me. She was covering her own decades-old affair, and she was willing to destroy anyone, even her own daughter, to keep it buried. My dad said softly, "I think she started telling lies about you because she knew you'd never forgive her if you found out. She wanted to make you look unreliable first, so no one would believe you if you ever told the truth." My head spun. It wasn't just manipulation. It was strategy. I thanked him for telling me and hung up. I just sat there for hours, staring at the wall, feeling like every memory I'd ever had with her had been rewritten in an instant. The next morning, my phone exploded, calls from my aunt, texts from cousins. She'd already started spinning again, saying I'd forged the letter, that I'd had a breakdown. But this time, I didn't panic, because now I finally understood what she was truly afraid of. And I had something she didn't know I had. Proof of who my real father was. Proof that would shatter the perfect life she built on lies. And I was done protecting her. The thing about truth is, it doesn't stay buried. It waits. It rots quietly under everything you build, until the smell starts seeping through the cracks. And my mom had been patching those cracks her whole life. After my dad's confession, I started digging. Old files, photos, phone records. My mom had worked as a secretary at my elementary school for years. That's where she met Mr. Harris, the principal. He was married with 2 kids, lived just a few streets over back then. I remembered how he used to give me extra candy from his desk, how Mom would light up whenever he was around. Back then, I thought she was just friendly. But when I went through an old box of her keepsakes that she'd left in my childhood closet, I found something that turned my stomach inside out. Letters, handwritten, folded neatly inside a jewelry box labeled Old Tax Docs. They were love letters from him to her. The first one started with, "You said she looks like me when she smiles." I had to sit down. There it was. Confirmation. I didn't even need a DNA test. I read through every single one. There were dozens. The last few turned darker, him saying he couldn't leave his wife, that she needed to stop threatening to tell. One even mentioned those photos she kept for insurance. It hit me. She hadn't just been protecting her reputation. She'd been blackmailing him. I found one letter dated 2 years after I was born. He begged her to stop contacting his wife. He offered her money, said he'd send it through a friend. And sure enough, when I dug deeper through her old financial files, I found deposits from a consulting firm that didn't exist every quarter for nearly 15 years. She'd taken hush money from the man who fathered me. And when it ended, when the payments stopped, she turned all that rage onto me. That's why she needed to destroy my credibility before I ever got close to learning the truth. If I found out and people believed me, the story wouldn't just ruin her. It would destroy the legacy she'd built as the perfect church mom, the community volunteer, the woman who'd stood by her alcoholic husband. So she rewrote me as unstable, dramatic, a liar. That way, if I ever said, "My mom had an affair with my school principal and blackmailed him for years," she could just shake her head and say, "Poor thing, she's having one of her episodes again." It wasn't madness. It was strategy, cold, methodical survival. That realization made me physically sick. It also lit something in me I'd never felt before, pure, focused fury. She didn't destroy me because she hated me. She destroyed me because I was the living proof of what she'd done. The walking, talking evidence. I wasn't her daughter to her anymore. I was her biggest liability. When that sank in, the pain stopped feeling heavy. It started feeling sharp. Controlled. I wasn't going to scream or expose her in chaos. I was going to end her carefully, the same way she'd tried to end me. She thought she could rewrite history, so I decided to make the truth permanent, something she couldn't talk her way out of, and I knew exactly how to do it. She opened the envelope on a Thursday morning. Lily texted me one word. Opened, I sat on the couch and watched my phone like it was a lifeline. The packet was clinical, no theatrics, just facts. A short note that called her out by name, a timeline of lies, copies of the fabricated texts next to my real therapist messages, Lily's recorded confession, the love letters from Mr. Harris, and bank statements showing the hush payments disguised as consulting fees. I'd redacted anything too personal. This wasn't about humiliation for its own sake. It was about ignition, lighting a match at the base of her house of cards. Within an hour, my phone was ringing like a bell. Aunt Margaret, voice shaking, asked, "Is this true?" Cousin Jenna left a voicemail that broke halfway through. The church secretary sent a text that read, "We need to talk." I watched the little dot that meant my mother was typing and then deleting a reply a dozen times. I imagined her smile slipping, piece by piece. She called me finally, voice thin and high. "How could you?" she said. There was no menace in it, only panic. "How could I?" I answered. "How could you after everything?" I didn't raise my voice. That would have given her an opening to be the victim. I read her the most damning lines out loud, her own words from the letters, the deposits, Lily's admission. I watched something die on the other end. She tried to deflect, to cry, to twist it into me being cruel. I let her. People who wanted to believe her already were calling her. People who needed proof were reading it. By evening, the principal's name, Mr. Harris, was no longer whispered. He was on the phone with his wife. The town that had once admired my mother for her bake sales and volunteer hours suddenly had a new story. A neighbor texted a photo of the money orders I'd found tucked into an old church ledger. My inbox filled with messages I'd never expected. "We always wondered. I remember that look on his face. We're so sorry." She tried to rally sympathy. At the Sunday potluck she went to the next week. Because of course she went. People stared as she walked in like she was a stranger in a familiar dress. I didn't attend. I watched the fallout from a distance. Aunt Margaret confronted her in the pews. A woman from the PTA asked where the money for the Christmas bazaar had come from the previous year. A man I'd known since grade school, whose kids were taught by Mr. Harris, told my dad he'd seen him handing envelopes to my mother in the parking lot. I had wanted her dismantled. I hadn't wanted people to hate her so fully they forgot I was her child. That was the narrow line I tried to walk. But standing there, phone dark, I felt something shift from fury to something quieter. Relief. She called me one last time a week later. This time she was small. There were no smiles left in her voice. "You've ruined me," she said. "No," I said. "You wrote your own ending a long time ago." I paused. "I married the man I love. I'm building a life you can't control. That's the part you should regret." She sobbed like she never had in front of me, and for a second I almost reached for her. The old reflex, smooth things over, warmed my chest. Then I thought of the years she'd smoothed the truth away from me, the nights I'd spent apologizing for things I hadn't done. I let it go. Months later, the town still buzzes in corners, and Mr. Harris's resignation was quietly processed. My mother moved out of the house she'd curated for decades and into a neighbor's small apartment. People still call my phone sometimes, apologizing, asking questions I don't always answer. Jake and I live 2 towns over now. We've painted the bedroom a color she would have criticized and sleep 5 mornings a week without her voice sifting through our day. I mailed her the invitation back because she needed a physical object to hold, something that had once given her power, and I replaced it with truth. The note I left her in the envelope ended with a line that made her cry harder than anything. "You taught me how to survive you. I learned fast." She'll remember that line forever. I remember her smile too. It taught me how to sharpen mine.